Hello, everyone. Welcome. I haven't done many of these at all in the past, so bear with me. I'm going to do my best. I wanted to start by just saying we called this the "This is fine" discussion. I understand that things aren't necessarily fine. A lot of changes that we're all dealing with. A world that's completely different from the way it was just a few days ago, let alone a few weeks ago. So I don't think this is fine. I think this is really concerning and a worrying time. So just a little bit about me. My name is Scott Lewis. I'm the CEO and Editor-in-Chief at Voice of San Diego. I am one of 15 employees we have here. We have been working tirelessly since last week to try to gather a lot of different information, to try to understand what's happening, and to begin some investigations into what's happening. And just a little bit about me. I have a family as well. I have two children who go to public schools here, who are at home now. I have a wife, and we have, again, like we said, about 14 employees here. So I know what it's like to be quite worried about how things are going to go. We've weathered recessions as an organization before. We've weathered big tumultuous changes, but I've never weathered an entire shutdown of the economy. And so I'm trying my best to understand what our role is, what our duty is, what kinds of investigative work and explanatory work we can provide. I'm actually at the office right now. There is nobody else here. One of our people comes in and out doing some work to pay the bills and stuff like that. But we haven't actually closed the office. We've kept it open to try to make sure that it's an opportunity. It's a refuge for people who need access to the internet or colleagues. But we've encouraged all of our reporters to work remotely or from home. I have about half the staff. We have about half the staff working on issues regarding the coronavirus in San Diego and the massive mobilization that's taken place. And so you should check out their work at voiceofsandiego.org. So let's talk a little bit about what's happening right now. This is unprecedented. Again, the whole world has changed. I think it behooves us to talk about why we're doing all this for a second. So the economy is really like a lot of different connections, right? The economy is people meeting to trade goods, people connecting over different communication systems to trade goods. It's to buy content. It's to buy investments. It's all kinds of different things happening at one time. And so what has happened is the virus has hitched on us, on humans, a ride throughout our economy. And what we have decided as a world now is that virus is so damaging that we need to basically administer a kind of chemotherapy on the economy to stop it, that we need to do damage to the economy. We need to shut down those connections so that we can prevent that virus from doing more damage than that damage that we're doing to it now is going to cost. And so it hurts, and it hurts really bad, but we're doing it all, and I think in a really special way, to try to protect our most vulnerable citizens from dealing with what they're dealing with, or what could be coming. And what could be coming is really quite scary. Gymnasiums full of people without access to proper medical care, triage situations where nurses and doctors have to make horrifying decisions about who should survive and who should not, who should get resources and who should not. And we are all mobilizing as a community right now to avoid that fate. And so I think when I titled this, "This is Fine," that's what I wanted to communicate, that this is fine as in a way, as a really special way that we're all gathering together to mobilize on behalf of our most vulnerable people and on behalf of our medical system. And this chemotherapy that we're sort of administering on our economy is going to cause pain. Like chemotherapy, it's kind of a poison, but it is also a way to avoid a much worse fate for the economy than what could happen if we let the virus run amok through our economy. And so that might sound a little philosophical and weird, but I wanted to really put it in perspective. Like, it is literally our economy that is transmitting this virus, and so we are literally shutting down the economy so that it stops wreaking havoc and the pandemonium in its wake. And so I think that this is a really special thing that we're doing for our citizens. So let's move on to some specific news and information. I gather you all, as Voice of San Diego followers, understand how these things work. But remember that there is a lot of difference between the various government agencies. And so I think it behooves you to understand as well that the County of San Diego is different from the City of San Diego. And why that matters here is that the County of San Diego is itself responsible for public health. The County of San Diego's main role, one of its main roles, is to deal with public health, and in particular, the spread of viruses and disease. And that's why you're seeing the county really take the lead role on that. You've probably seen a couple of county supervisors in particular stand up. Greg Cox from South Bay, he's the chair of the county supervisors. There's 5 county supervisors, one in the South Bay, one that covers most of the city of San Diego, and most of the East County. There's another one in most of the East County, and then there's one in the northeast part of the county, and then there's one on the north coastal part of the county. Nathan Fletcher represents the city of San Diego, most of the city of San Diego in his district, and then Greg Cox, the chair. So you've seen Cox and Fletcher be really involved in this and in these public discussions, and that's because they do represent the county and do then speak in many ways for that county administration, which is doing so much to try to address the public health concerns. What happened yesterday was that the county, and as announced by Fletcher and these others, announced that they were going to prohibit gatherings of more than 50 people, and that they were discouraging gatherings of any smaller amount. That was a really incredible step to take. I, of course, have never seen anything like that, and I don't think anybody around here has seen anything like that. And so the idea of you just can't get together in groups is an extraordinary step and a real sign of our times, and that was led by the county. Now, what is the City of San Diego's role? Well, the City of San Diego runs operations for about the 1.5 million or so people who live within the City of San Diego boundaries. And so that is a much different role. So if the County of San Diego, for instance, says it's prohibited to have a bar open or a restaurant or a big gathering, well, it would be the City of San Diego's police who maybe need to enforce that if it ever gets to that point, would maybe be the ones that go, and I think there was stories about them going to bars and warning them that this was coming down. So you can kind of see how the interplay there is the county sets the policy, but then the city may have to make specific decisions about how to enforce or how to carry out some of those policies. We saw the interplay back in 2 years ago, or 3 years ago, when the county and the city were dealing with the hepatitis A outbreak. The county has the lead role on dealing with bacteria or virus vector control, and it was the city that has to deal with homelessness. And so, how those two interplay was a really fascinating and problematic experience that they supposedly learned a lot from, about how to coordinate efforts and how to make sure that the county's guidance is enforced, and vice versa, as the city tries to deal with its problems. And so when you're wondering where, say, the mayor of San Diego is, or where the county, the city council is versus where the county supervisor is, that's why you're going to see the county much more prevalent. And the county itself is kind of an outpost of the state of California. And so the city looks to the county looks to the state. The state is the one that sort of set the guidance that bars and restaurants needed to cut back, if not close. And it was the county that then came and took a much more stringent stand on that. So that's kind of how that situation works. We've got a number of frequently asked questions that our reporter Lisa Halverstadt and Maya Sri Krishnan went through. We asked people for their their pressing questions, and we were inundated with people who were full of different ideas and misconceptions, but also just questions about how this all works. So let's go through those. One of the questions was, why does it seem so hard to get tested? How do I get tested if I think I have it? The county public health officer, Wilma Wooten, said that we shouldn't expect that everyone will be able to get tested. Just a few days ago, they said there's only 1,200 tests for the county of San Diego. 1,200. There are 3 million people in San Diego, 3 million plus, and so that's obviously inadequate to test a lot of people. So they were prioritizing people based on this. They've been to infected areas like China, Italy, or Iran. They have a history of contact with someone who's been confirmed to have the virus, and they have present respiratory distress symptoms. Our reporter Andrew Keats did a Q&A with Steve Padilla. He's the city councilman he's a city councilman in Chula Vista, who is also the chairman of the Coastal Commission. So the Coastal Commission has representatives from all across the state that decide, what can get built on the coast, how do you protect access on the coast, all those things. And Steve Padilla is the chairman of that commission. And so he flew up to Santa Cruz to chair a meeting there of the Coastal Commission. He said that a couple of days within that, he started to feel sick. He started to feel so sick that by that Friday, he just skipped meetings. By that Saturday, he came home, got the test for the coronavirus after telling them that he'd gone through San Jose, and that was his theory about why they allowed him to have the test so fast. He got the test. He tested positive for the coronavirus that we're all worried about. And I really recommend you go to voicesandiego.org and check out his Q&A with Andrew Keats, because it was an extraordinary illustration of just how brutal that disease is, how hard he says his body is fighting, how hard the temperature has been, the fever has been to control. And it was really very hard to read, to think that somebody that healthy and rather young was dealing with it. So check that out. Go to voiceofsandiego.org and see his story about that. But to me, the Padilla news really struck a chord, because it indicated that this thing is far, far more widespread than whatever the count is at now. I believe they said it was in the 50s of the number of people in San Diego who've got it. Remember, last week it was at 6, and they announced then after that their first community transmission. Everybody know what a community transmission is. That's where somebody got it here in San Diego, and we don't know why. We don't know that they were anywhere connected with somebody. We don't know that there was any travel to these places. And so if it's just transmitting through the community, well, that indicates that it's going to be very hard to control. It's going to be very hard to control unless we stay isolated from each other and respect some of those guidances. So the Padilla information was a real jarring one for me. Not only that he felt so bad and that it had crippled him in the way that it did for a few days, and also the indication in my mind that this is far more widespread. And so again, that gets back to what we're trying to do, which is we're trying to administer a kind of chemotherapy on the economy. The economy is transmitting this disease, and we need to separate all of our connections with that so that we can keep it from spreading too fast and too powerfully to the point where we are feeling giant tents giant gymnasiums full of sick people who don't have access to the proper resources. I spoke yesterday with Dr. Jim Dunford. He used to be the chief medical officer for the city of San Diego. He's also professor emeritus at the UC San Diego. He covers emergency medicine. And he said, look, when you talk to doctors, they're worried. When you talk to nurses, they're worried. And those are the kind of people we should listen to when we're wondering about whether we should be worried. And one of the points he made was, look, if 20% of them, or 10% of them, or 15% of them get sick, get this virus, that will start to itself expose giant holes in our safety net, in our medical system. The Union Tribune reported the other day there's only 8,000 beds in the county. If a very simple arithmetic, if up to 50,000 San Diegans get this, and any portion of them need to have access to the healthcare system, we could find ourselves overwhelmed very quickly. And so all of this is not about stopping the disease, it's about slowing down its transmission so that we avoid those giant tent situations or the stress on our resources. And so I really think it's important to remember that we are shutting down the economy precisely because it's the economy that is transmitting this disease and the connections between the economy. And Dunford also made the point that if there's a lot of demand from people who need access to ICUs in particular, the number of spaces we have for that is so very limited that could get overwhelming very quickly. And if we see what's happening in Italy, that is a situation we want to avoid. Second question, how is this impacting our economy? Well, that's not an easy one to go through. First of all, we were watching the complete shutdown of the convention center. We are watching what that means for hotels and restaurants around that. And that's particularly terrifying, I think, for a lot of people because not only do many jobs relate to those industries, but also there is a significant impact on the city of San Diego's budget as well. The city of San Diego has three main sources of revenue: sales tax, property tax, and tourism taxes. Those tourism taxes could take a dramatic hit, and the sales taxes, although maybe some of the grocery sales could mitigate that. So we are very interested in following how that affects, because we might have to see dramatic changes to service levels. Rec centers, libraries may have to close. Those are usually the first to get shut down, and depending on how bad this is, it could be immense. I just saw a question come in about renters who can't afford this month's rent. Well, that is a very interesting question at this moment. The city council is led by a woman named Georgette Gomez. She's the council president. The city council of the city of San Diego has 9 council representatives from each different part of the city of San Diego. Georgette Gomez represents the College area and the City Heights and Talmadge area. She is proposing today, and there will be a hearing, to provide immediate relief to protect people from evictions and to provide some rental assistance. So I do not know that is something people who are worried can count on in any form at this moment. But it does look like there are a lot of people thinking about that immediately. But it does seem like the state is heading towards a moment of declaring, if not mandating, that landlords are not allowed to evict people during this crisis. I don't think that is going to be enforceable at this moment, but you should watch the City Council hearing. If you need any guidance on that, you can go to sandiego.gov and check out the city TV links, sandiego.gov, and you can watch that hearing as people decide what level of support or restrictions people can put on landlords or support for rentals. That is something that they're considering for tenants, I mean. Sales at the San Ysidro businesses by the border have already taken a hit. We're watching all kinds of those numbers. It's really hard to see the numbers because we get them monthly, and so if air traffic plummets in a few weeks, we won't see that until next month. But we are working on ways to get more immediate feedback and information. What's happening in schools? 43 school districts in the county of San Diego. They are all closed. Now, there's various times when they say they might reopen because of year-round school schedules and things like that, but they are all closed. I'm sure you all know that if you have kids. I have 2 kids at home. I'm supposed to get home at 3 to do PE with them because I'm so very athletic. That is my charge. So I know everybody's dealing with that. I think one thing that we're going to be watching and very interested in is how teachers and students adjust and what kind of resources they provide so that people can continue their education. One of the biggest things that always comes up in education is this idea of the summer slide, how far behind people or how much momentum students lose on the summer schedule when they don't go to school for several months or 2 months or 3 months. And, will this be an exaggerated version of that? And how can we stop that from happening? That's a question that I've been intensely asking our reporters to consider and to dig into. I know there are some resources popping up. I know teachers who are doing things like art classes on Facebook and other things like that. So we are going to be digging into what kind of remote learning opportunities are presented. One of the things I'm very worried about is how many resources a lot of more privileged individuals and families have and students have, how many schedules and Facebook Live and FaceTime typing encounters they can have versus other folks who don't have those resources or can't even provide that kind of structure for their as they just try to protect their jobs and survive through this. So that's one area we'll be watching. What about the homeless population? Homeless San Diegans are particularly vulnerable, of course. The county of San Diego, we mentioned the county's role in the public health system. The county of San Diego has procured hundreds of motel rooms that they're going to try to make available to people who are housing insecure like this, especially if they are infected with the virus so that they can be isolated. And so how they administer that, how they decide who gets it, how they protect that and work that through is going to be something that that my team in particular is going to be watching, but they are working hard to try to get people off the street and then to take people and make sure that they can be isolated if they need to be to protect others from the transmission of the virus. There was a question just came up about grocery stores. It seems like even in the places with the most intense lockdowns, grocery stores will stay open. And I think it's really important for people to understand that there's no indication that the supply lines of food and even toilet paper are going to be tremendously affected by it. So, this hoarding behavior, I understand there's a lot of uncertainty, but we do not have any indication that they won't be able to restock those shelves as rapidly as they ever have. In fact, there's a lot of indication that Costco and other places are hiring in order to provide enough resources so that they can continue to operate at full levels. So I understand storing up food. I understand a lot of people's work doing that. I understand the concern. None of us have ever seen reality shift like this so fast. So that makes sense, but we have no indication at all that grocery stores are going to be closed and they won't be able to restock their shelves. Obviously, we would be the first to raise alarm if that was ever counterindicated. Will the border shut down? No, it will not, and there's no indication of that anytime soon. The Customs and Border Protection System are working on that, and it seems pretty obvious that they're going to be they're going to keep it open. A couple of other points. Seniors, it was mandated that all people over 65 and those with underlying chronic health conditions stay home and isolate yourself. The county recommends that if you have any of the symptoms, that you self-quarantine for 14 days. Telecommuting is the new norm, obviously. Courts, the San Diego Superior Court Monday sent out a note that most court operations would halt through at least April 3rd. Just a note on the board, I just saw a question. There were some protesters that were trolling people in the United States saying they want to close the border. There is no indication that Mexico officially wants to close the border in any capacity. That would be devastating for both sides of the border. There was an estimate a few years ago that our region, San Diego region, gets $4 billion of economic benefit every year from the border. They are not going to shut that down lightly, and we have no indication that Mexico is interested in doing that. Back to the courts. All jurors summoned to the Superior Court from March 16th through April 3rd should not report. If you get a jury summons, don't go. They'll figure out another way for you to fulfill that obligation. Let's see. In La Jolla, they have set up a drive-up testing facility at the Scripps Health in La Jolla. That is called the COVID Cabana. It's a very San Diego way to describe a testing facility for the virus. So if you do meet some of these criteria, you should check that out. Let's see. I think one other recommendation about schools that we want to make sure to help people understand. This isn't a snow day. This isn't a, let's get our friends together and hang out. They have recommended, the county has recommended that no groups at all get together, that you don't go on play dates. The whole point of all of this, again, is to sever those connections that the economy has created between all of us. We are all connected. The economy itself is a whole array of connections. And those connections are what's transmitting the virus right now. And so, unfortunately, we have to sever them. That's why there's nobody here at the office with me. Anna's helping out and doing some great things. But we've had to do that as well. So I'm sorry, but keep your kids at home. And hopefully they'll remember this time as a time that we all rallied together to protect literally our most vulnerable and our healthcare system. What a special thing for us all to do, to sacrifice. I personally think that the people who are losing their jobs or who are being left economically insecure right now are kind of a new type of veteran, a new type of war veteran in a way. They are sacrificing themselves for the broader good of this community. And, I think that's really special. And I think that the federal government, the state government, and the city government need to work to make sure we recognize that sacrifice and provide for it. Because, without them making that sacrifice, the amount of pain and challenge that this economy could face in a broader way is unimaginable. And it already is unimaginable. So I think that you should all be proud, and we should all consider everybody who's sacrificing in this time to be part of this collective effort to protect our most vulnerable. And I'm so proud of all of you who are willing to go through this. So let me review. Voice of San Diego is a nonprofit news organization. Our role is to try to investigate and explain what's happening in San Diego, and we are not going to stop doing that. In fact, I don't know that our work has ever been more important than now, and that is we're not going to be the best place to pass along specific information about numbers of cases, about what's closed here and there, but we are going to be there to investigate how the city and the county will deal with the aftermath of this. We are going to be there to make sure that the schools are providing equitable and high quality education to everybody, and we are going to be there to explain how this all works, because nobody understands what the County of San Diego is versus the City of San Diego. Nobody except for Voice of San Diego listeners and readers like you. So we will be there to try to guide that through there. But then also, all this stuff still matters. The city government, convention center, the fire department, the police, all of these things that we investigate all these years, that all still matters. That can't be avoided. We can't be so consumed by what's happening that we don't investigate all these quality of life issues that we've followed for so long. And so it's my pledge that our staff will continue to only do the work that they think they can do better and different than everybody else, and that is a real balance between what we do as far as covering and understanding and investigating how we're reacting to this virus, but also the normal and everyday issues in San Diego that we need to continue to keep an eye on. So that's my pledge to you all. If you do find these valuable, we'll keep talking so that people can follow along with what we're doing. And Voice of San Diego is dependent on you. So if you want this service to continue to thrive, please continue to go to voiceofsandiego.org/donate and tell our journalists that their work is valuable and that you're happy that they're out there looking for you. voiceofsandiego.org/donate. I'm Scott Lewis, CEO and Voice, and you send me any questions at VOSD Scott on Twitter, or scott@voiceofsandiego.org. That's scott@voiceofsandiego.org. And we'll respond as soon as we can, and we'll collect all those questions for later. And I love you all, San Diego. We're doing something special here. We are doing something important and special. We're rallying together to protect our most vulnerable and our healthcare system, and we can get through this. And you know what? We can't control how much damage it does to the economy, but we can control how awesome the recovery is when that's time. So let's get there when we can. I do have my own Insta. It's private right now, but maybe I'll change it. It's Scott M. Lewis. Scott M. Lewis. Thanks, guys, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.